There we go. Thank you. I'm sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
No, it's my pleasure to introduce you, Mary Beth. We're celebrating your first novel, Bloom Again. I have to say, it's the only book I have ever read that was dedicated to a polar bear. It's totally cool. And I understand the reason is that about 20 years ago in Kaktovik, you were in an old school bus and you were driving to the place where the villagers were leaving their discarded whale bones, and there were polar bears there. And one of them, a big old male, sauntered over towards your school bus and lifted his forepaws onto the side of the and peered in the window where you were sitting. And you peered right back at him. And only then did you realize that your window was open. So you are, in fact, the only person I know who has actually come nose to nose with a polar bear and lived to tell the tale. Here probably already knows Mary Beth, and you know that she's a prolific writer in so many different genres. She has worked in poetry, Tender Gravity, for example, in nonfiction, Among Wolves, for example, nature essays in the very important Cross Currents North, and now here she is writing fiction. She is an Alaskan who started out in the Great Smoky Mountains. Now, I don't know if you compare your Chugach Mountains in Alaska with the Great Smoky Mountains, if you even call those great or even mountains, but certainly it makes a difference to your writing that you are up there in Alaska. It just, your love for your place just comes off the page every time you turn the page. It's wonderful. You are, in fact, a writer to match those mountains. You are readers, so you will find Mary Beth in Orion and Sierra and The Guardian, or on the trail with her two wild huskies. Thanks so much, Mary Beth, for letting me be part of this today.
Thanks, Kathy. I'm really delighted to be doing this with you. And I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank Trustees for Alaska for sponsoring this and hosting it. I want to thank University of Alaska Press for continuing to exist and putting out this book through the guidance of Peggy Shoemaker. And I'm just grateful for everyone that's here that's taken the time out of their very busy and crazy lives to sit and listen and enjoying this conversation. And I want to introduce Kathleen Dean Moore. This is a woman that I have admired for a very long time and had the great pleasure to meet many years ago at a Association for the Study of Literature and the Environment conference in Oregon. Um, in the winter, Kathy lives in coastal Oregon, but in summer, she lives on an island in southeast Alaska, which she says is a brilliant plan because it guarantees wet, cloudy weather all year round for her and lots of water to write about. She's a philosophy professor, pondering questions like what is the world? What is our place in the world? How then shall we live? Such an important question. And she's an incredible essayist, nature writer, author of more than a dozen books about our moral relation to the wild, reeling world. So many books, but the two most recent that I want to mention are Take Heart, Encouragement for Earth's Weary Lovers, and Earth's Wild Music, Celebrating and Defending the Songs of Nature. Uh, Kathy, thank you so much for being here with me today. It means so much.
Yes, it's a wonderful gathering. As I look at these names, I know so many of you, and it makes me very, very happy. Um, when I first read this book, Bloom Again, I wrote a blurb and I thought maybe we could start out by my simply reading that now. I said, if you love the world, if you fear for its future, you must read Bloom Again. Its beautifully told story lifted me, moved me to tears, and gave me ideas, energy, determination, and yes, I will say it, hope. But you don't have to take my word for it. Let's start out by listening to Mary Beth read an excerpt from Bloom Again.
All right, thanks. I'm going to read from early in the book, and I think this gets to the heart of the theme in the book. uh, this is from the point of view of Elise, one of the two main characters, and Elise is the character that lives in Alaska. Elise returns from the grocery store to a message on the landline. It's from Jim, and his voice is so even, she's certain he's delivering the bad news she's been expecting since applying for the artist residency months ago. Instead, he says, "We've made our selections, and you've been chosen to be one of 3 artists on the expedition. Congratulations." Elise jumps up in the air, groceries jostling in her arms, an avocado thunking to the floor. The tingling rises from her spine to her head as she puts the groceries on the counter, picks up the avocado, and listens to the rest of the message. Details about visas, health checkups, all the forms they'll be emailing once they get her acceptance. "Well," she says, letting out a sigh that fills the room, "evidently the moon is not out of my reach." Hands shaking, head buzzing, she texts Maggie, who immediately calls. "Oh my God," she says, "I cannot believe it." "Well, of course I can. Your work is amazing." "But what a fucking adventure this will be." "Damn, girl, damn, I'm so proud of you." "Thanks. I can't really believe it. I keep expecting him to call back and say, 'Whoops, so sorry, my bad.'" "Yeah, they're lucky to have you." She calls Jim to accept, trying to sound professional even as her feet do a little jig. "Your paintings," he says, "are so surprising. Kudzu and polar bears. But what really sold us was what you wrote about how art can reach people in ways that science can't. That it bypasses the analytical mind and goes straight to emotion and imagination, creating understanding and empathy. It's just what we want to change minds and hearts."
So that's marvelous. I love the avocado. Let's start right there. People say, follow the science, follow the science. I remember in my town in Corvallis, there was this big parade, follow the science, follow the science. But it doesn't necessarily get us where we need to go. And your excerpt that you just read talks about how visual art can go straight into the mind, and I think that's true of music. But it's also true of literature. And I wonder if you'd maybe start off talking a little bit about what you think about the relation between science and art and the importance of their working together.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I've always been interested in both. One of the characters in this book, Elise, is a visual artist. I love painting, especially oil painting. And the other character is a scientist, and I love science, and I almost became a botanist, like Astrid is. So it's always been, that those twin loves sort of. But the thing about art and science is that we didn't always have this split between them. And if you think about someone like Leonardo da Vinci, he didn't even bother putting labels on himself. He just did what he wanted to do. He invented, he did art. And so I think that we need like that kind of Renaissance like leap where we allow these supposedly separate disciplines to merge more. I I was talking to the cover artist for my book, Kristen Link, who's an artist in McCarthy, and she has been to Tulloch Field Station, which is north of Fairbanks, and so she's done a lot of work in the field with scientists as an artist. And she was on a panel with some of them, and she said the scientists felt really jealous that they couldn't express their emotions in their work the way artists and writers can. And I thought that was really interesting because it kind of cuts both ways. And Kristen was saying she wished she was a scientist. She wonders if she should have done that. But I think these kinds of opportunities where at the Tulloch Field Station or the, artist residencies like the Denali Artist Residency or the Voices of the Wilderness Residency, these opportunities where artists get to be in the field with scientists doing their work and learn from each other is really important.
So you chose to bring your storytelling chops, which are considerable, to climate change, to the science of climate change.
Yeah.
Is this what motivated you to choose to do this?
Well, I it's pretty hard to ignore climate change living in Alaska.
Oh,
and having an environmental education. You know, as Aldo Leopold said, if you have an environmental education, you walk in a world of wounds, and it's just true. Um, so there wasn't any turning away from it or ignoring it for me. And so I was writing about it. I was writing poems. I wrote many essays, that kind of thing. But I turned to fiction with this one because there's this thing that a novel can do, and I realized it from my own reading of novels and listening to a couple of, um, well, it was at another ASLE conference, Anne Pancake, who wrote this incredible novel called Strange as This Weather Has Been. And it's about mountaintop coal removal in West Virginia, which is where my father's family is from. So, but the book is gorgeous, and the characters are amazing, and the story is captivating. And that's the thing about fiction is that you can bring in these big, scary, ground moving things in a way that the reader hears them differently and takes them in differently, takes them in more through the heart, I think, than in, say, you know, an op-ed in the newspaper or something. So I really wanted to explore that, especially with climate change, because I feel that it's not just about the science. We know that because we've been ignoring it for so long, that we have to really change or how we feel.
I really like what Chet Ramos said about this artificial division between art and science. He was talking about Galileo, who renounced his science to save his own life. And Chet says, at that moment, science lost the great language of celebration. It's a terrible loss. And art denied itself participation in the greatest intellectual adventure of human history. So if you can bring those two back together again, what a grand reunion that will be. But let me just say this, you're very, very brave writer, because when you choose to write about climate change, you're choosing to deliver bad news, and people don't necessarily like that. Right? I'm writing a talk I'm going to give next week, and I know in advance they're going to hate it because it's about extinction. So that the challenge is, I mean, you talk about that challenge. You say, let's see, we're here. Um, a warming climate is melting ice, and even if every human on the planet immediately stopped emitting carbon, there's already so much in the atmosphere that the bears are likely doomed. This year's cubs, scientists predict, will be the last generation of Alaska polar bears. How do you handle this challenge of delivering bad news to people who are, generally happy to be in denial?
I think, again, it just goes back to the power of storytelling and the power of the characters to be engaging enough that the reader flows into it that way. I think that, you know, again, I just go back to my models like Barbara Kingsolver's Prodigal Summer, which again was an incredible book. So beautiful, such a beautiful story. And it was about the demise of the red wolf in the wild and the so far failed, you know, rewilding effort there. So I think that there's just this way that we humans, I mean, we love stories, and that just by using that, we can reach people on that deeper level.
Yeah, one of the things that Elise says, she's the artist, right? And Elise says that one of her efforts in her paintings of the Arctic are to make grief and loss tangible. She's speaking for you?
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
she is. Yes, I think that to the degree we can make it tangible. Well, that's the thing about climate change is that mostly, not so much anymore, but mostly we can ignore it because it's not really hitting us in the face when we wake up in the morning. Um, but by making it tangible, and by making grief tangible, I think it's really important to grieve and to not close our hearts off from the grief that we all are probably feeling now, but to instead allow it entrance into our lives and without grief there is no joy. It's like one side of two different sides of the coin. And so I think that, again, just allowing that and showing that through my characters, through their grappling with whether to let it in or not, whether to let the grief in or not, whether to face the loss or not. Elise is she's pretty open that way. Astrid is not. They show a different face of how you confront this. And I really wanted to show that because we have so many different ways of handling bad news. But in the end, we have to handle it, whether we consciously choose to step into and figure it out, or whether it finally does slap us in the face when we wake up in the morning.
One of the things that really thrills me about your work, I mean, really, really impresses me, is that you do make grief and loss tangible, but you also make love tangible. The love of these women for their places is just exuberant in your writing. It's gorgeous writing. And you have Elise saying this very smart thing, I think, that love and grief are always paired.
Yes, yes. Both Astrid and Elise are doing what they love. They love the world. But I've always loved the world. I think all of us do. But we might tend to get closed off after a while because of all the bad news. And so I think that love for the world is what can really propel us into some kind of action and sustain us with all the bad news coming in.
Yeah, and as you say, without the love, there wouldn't be any grief. I mean, if you didn't care, why would you grieve? And so your ability to make this love actual makes the grief real too. It's very impressive what you're doing with that. And your descriptions of the natural places are absolutely glorious, just glorious. Can I ask you to read my favorite description? It's on page
Yes.
121. It's the one about tusks.
Okay. Yes, it's just this one paragraph, right?
Oh, sure.
Couple of paragraphs?
How about the first and the second paragraphs?
Okay. Elise has never seen mammoth remains outside of a museum, has never seen them in the place where the animal lived and died. She touches the tusk, the smoothness surprising her. But it's the colors that are most astonishing, as if every color that has ever existed is in that fossilized curl. Browns open to reds, blend to purples, fade to blues, hints of greens reveal yellows. They swirl together and apart in a patterned rhythm like some forgotten language. How many thousands of years has this lain here, undisturbed except by wind and snow and the talons of the owl, burnished ivory spiring from vast tundra, speaking of the tenuous hold of existence. Especially here, in the farthest reaches of the north, this place so unforgiving, and life here so fragile and tenacious at the same time. She remembers a term Amy told her, extremophiles, species that live in environments where most others cannot, species that live at the edge of what seems possible. That's here, life at the edge, polar bears and walrus and snowy owls living at the edge.
Thank you. You can, listening to her, you can tell that this is a book about color. Different writers choose different senses, I think, that make them, that thrill them. And over again, it's color. It's green down in Carolinas, and it's white in every shade of white up north that a color. So it makes me ask you, Mary Beth, are you in fact a painter?
I wish.
Oh,
I wish I was. Elise is a painter, so that's how she's seeing this. But have, okay, so I was asked recently, what, if you couldn't be a writer, what would you be? And my answer was, I would be a traveling wilderness ranger who studies lycopods and does plein air paintings of the places that she works in. So I've always
raise
loved
your hand if you want to join that group.
I know. You sound like a great career.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, but I've always loved visual art, and I have taken a few oil painting classes, but here and there, and just enough to make me appreciate even more looking at a work of art, looking at the way the artist uses color and shading and form. It's really something for me what art can do, and I like to play in other forms. I think it's good for me as a writer to, play in art a little bit, play in music a little bit. Um, but because I think it all comes back to the writing. Like if I practice piano or banjo or something, I'm not going to play for anybody but me. But I'm going to maybe that musicality will come into my prose.
It does. Sound, color for sure, sight and sound. And then there's one place that thrilled me when you brought in smell, when you asked, in fact, what did dinosaur air smell like? I don't know. But that's interesting to think about. I bet it was pretty fecund. I bet it was quite rich.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this love for the natural world and the way that you describe it. Oh, that by the way, that description of the tusk reminded me of that stupid senator who held up a big piece of plain white paper and said, "This is what the Arctic is." And what you're doing is showing us that that is absolutely that white just rainbows into all these different colors. And so it's a great pleasure from a person down south to think about the Arctic in that rich way. Um, but the point that I was going to come to is that both Elise and Astrid, in their times of real sorrow and uncertainty, wander outside and they find a certain kind of part of nature, same one again and again, that comforts them. Is that autobiographical?
Well, the idea of it is, and yeah, I spent a lot of time in the Arboretum like Astrid does when I was in school in Chapel Hill.
Mhm.
Um, and I have places here that I go to again and again. I have trees. I'm a big fan of tree hugging. I have specific trees that I just love, and I know they love me. There's a cottonwood grove down by Campbell Creek across the street from me. There's a western hemlock that I love. Blueberry Hill, there's a turn in the trail where I can look up valley. It's just a gorgeous view. There's a hill where I look at the swirling waters of Turnagain Arm. So there are places I go back to again and again. And the other thing I wanted to say is that there were places in the Appalachians like that for me too. And there were these times, and for Astrid and Elise, this is true, and for many of us, I think too, where when we're in the natural world, for me, it's always when I'm alone that the veil drops, and it's like what Virginia Woolf called moments of being, where the oneness of all things, for lack of a better phrase, permeates, and I'm aware of that there's no boundary anymore between me and everything else, and I love those moments. I remember having one as a teenager up in the Appalachians. I remember exactly the spot where that happened, and I go back to that spot every time I go visit friends and family in Asheville. But it's this this moment that we can feel in the natural world. It's just so it's solace, and it just feeds me. It's nourishing.
I'm going to guess that everybody who's listening has a special place, has one place where they can go when they are sorrowing and they where they can find comfort. And I thought maybe it would be interesting just to take a few minutes and ask people to jot down in the chat just a brief description of that place or name it or tell us what ecosystem like is it a cottonwood grove? And just quick jot down your place, your special comfort place.
Shall we read them out loud?
I'm going to ask Donnell to do that. Donnell, are you with us?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So I bet maybe not. So here we have, I, can you do that, Mary Beth? Do you have a way of accessing that?
I do, yeah. Let me get to the right one. One person said home.
Ah, nice.
One person, Nancy, said Beluga Slough and Homer.
Oh, May.
and Auk Bay. Water, Campbell Creek at the end of my street too, says Cherry, says she must be a neighbor. Stimson Family Reserve, Nature Reserve in Bellingham. Antonia says my back porch in Anchorage. Rika says next to Lampert Lake in Homer at dusk and her yard in October.
Yeah, that's evocative. Makes me want to hop on the first plane out of Eugene, Oregon. Find my way there. What does it mean to you then? I mean, all of these people are writers, and most of them, I'm sure, are writers and are fed by their places. What does it mean to be an Alaskan writer? You quoted Kurt Vonnegut in an epigraph who said at the about the Alaskan perspective, at the edge, you see all kinds of things you can't see from the center. What does it mean to you, Mary Beth, that you're an Alaskan writer?
Um, I think that being an Alaska writer, I have a responsibility and an opportunity to share what life is like in a place that a lot of people around the world still romanticize and see as some place they, we have visitors that come in summer and it's like their once in a lifetime trip to Alaska. It's a really big deal. And so I feel that it's important to give the gift of that place through my work, but in a way that's real. There's so many misconceptions still. I remember when my son was younger and still in school, a friend of mine from college who's still in North Carolina said, "Well, do they have regular high schools there?" I'm like, "Yes, they do." But I mean, it's just we're so easily out of mind. And I think that's part of the thing about writing about climate change here is that we're far away, we're kind of off the map. A lot of times we literally are off the map, and we're kind of out of mind. And I like that in this book I have the contrast in Astrid, who lives in North Carolina, right in the middle of the East Coast, very populated, very well known, um, and so I can play off of that and make it something that's more familiar to readers too. But the other thing about that quote is that that edge is also has to do with our comfort zone. And I feel that we're being asked as a society right now to move outside of our comfort zones. And that's why Striley, Astrid's professor mentor, says, being at that edge is good news because it means you're doing what no one else can do, following your work into something that the world has not before perceived. And I love that idea of like, so I think of that in my own work, pushing the edge, stepping out of the comfort zone and not doing the same thing. Maybe that's why I've written in all the different genres. That really pushes me to the edge. But I think it's important to shake things up.
Does anybody ever, has anyone ever said to you, as people have said to your characters, um, when you turn to advocacy, you are turning away from art? That art is for art's sake, and that when you put it to a cause, when you use it to push people towards action, in some ways you're sullying the art. Has anybody ever talked to you in those terms?
No one said it to me directly, but I think it has an impact on where my work gets placed.
Ooh.
Um, and that is, I think, why I understand the hesitation of both my characters because, if you write something, you want it to get seen by people. I'm not writing a journal, I'm writing something that I want to share with the world. And I have found times where, where do my books land or where do my poems land? And I feel that sometimes we're kind of preaching to the choir, like if they're landing in environmental journals, for example, that's good, but it also isn't reaching out beyond that. And so I have that frustration with it, and I think that has to do with the fact that it's environmental work is it's hard to reach people through it. I really feel that it's challenging, even still today.
Yeah. Yeah, I have experienced the same sort of thing, especially when you're writing about bad news. It's very hard to place work that's sad. It's very hard. Yeah. So I think that that really means that we need to start talking about hope, Mary Beth,
Mhm.
because your characters say some really interesting things. We could start with that old Professor Striley you mentioned, who said there's hope, and with it, the call to action. So right away in your work, you're linking up hope and acting. Would you go to page 105? And starting with the third paragraph, would you read, let me see if I get this right. 135. Would you start, she walks and walks and
Mhm.
go down through, close down?
Yeah, okay. I'll just read the whole, that last chapter, paragraph too, if that's fine.
Please do.
Okay. She walks and walks, aware she is going farther than she has yet alone. The sun hangs low on the horizon, lifting just enough to send shivers of gold across the tundra, lighting the backs of low-bush blueberry and sedges, making them appear taller. Nothing moves, nothing makes a sound, except her boots crunching morning frost. She stops and listens. The immensity, the power. She can hear the place thrumming, a low sound, a vibration. How is it possible that humans are causing the destruction of a place with such power? She has not yet accepted it. She still holds tight to a hope that it's not as bad as they think, that there is still time to turn it around, that humans will suddenly wake up and do it. In time for polar bears, walrus, and sea ice, in time for Arctic villages and the atolls of the South Pacific. She cannot accept the alternative, not and keep breathing. Open heart, broken heart, she whispers. Open heart, broken heart. Whatever happens, don't close down. I'll stop there.
I hope that people will make a note to keep going on 105 because your description of the little Arctic fox is so beautiful.
Well, you want me? I can read that. It's just one paragraph.
Do that, do that.
Okay. A rustling, and she turns swiftly. Nothing, only tundra, the tight smattering of buildings, and then the dark sea. Another rustle in the grass, and she sees the sound's source, an Arctic fox, small and with a fur coat so thick that the fox looks rotund. The petite triangle of a face staring at her, that white face with perfectly pointed ears and those two bright amber eyes. There's a moment of shared gaze, as if Fox is daring her to look away. A moment, so fleeting. When she is Fox, Fox is she. Her warm white fur, her hunger. Then, bearing a small, toothy grin, the fox snaps up a vole and lopes across the tundra, an undulating movement of absolute grace, the bushy tail following like a sine wave.
The bushy tail following like a sine wave is brilliant. Um, I also, I also love this, the fox daring her to look away. That's just so much about what the book is about, it's daring people to look away. But the part I want to focus on is open heart, broken heart, open heart, broken heart. I often think of my own work as this futile effort to open people's hearts without breaking them. Is it possible? I don't know. Tell me why you wrote that, open heart, broken heart.
I think I think a broken heart is an open heart in a way. I mean, I think that our hearts are not really fully open until they've been broken, until it's that that grief and joy again. It's you can't really just be joyful all the time and not feel grief, or you really don't feel joy. And I I have to say too that I have studied Buddhism a lot. I have some teachers that are very important to me, and one of them is Pema Chodron. And I had this little notebook from some of the talks that she gave and some notes that I wrote. I just want to read it real quickly. Just
Oh,
a
yeah.
moment. We who are suffering because of the world's suffering are doing so because our sense of self has expanded beyond our body to trees, animals, the planet. We suffer because our sense of self has expanded to include all that. So our suffering comes from a basis of empathy and compassion. And so we can see it is also a source of strength. The oneness we experience is exactly what will heal us. So I really think that that's true, and I feel that to be true, and I feel that in my writing I want to impart that if I can impart that to people, that it is also a sense of strength to feel grief deeply, then we won't be so afraid, and we'll feel it, and from that can spring some action that we may not even know is going to come.
Your final page seems to me to be very much informed too by a Buddhist point of view. It's almost as if this is offered to readers as the moral of the story, although I don't want to oversimplify it and I don't want to put you in that position, but you do say, and this is Elise, she feels a lightness, a hope rooted in action. Once again, we've got this link between hope that roots in action. So she refers, Elise, with her mother's wisdom. Do what you can, release the outcome. Do what you can, release the outcome. Tell us more.
Um, well, Pema Chodron, I'll go back to Pema Chodron again.
Yeah.
She said, there's really never any reason, and this probably came from one of her teachers, but there's really never any reason to just sit around and wring your hands. I mean, if there's a problem, then you need to look at it and say, is there something I can do about it? If there's something that you can do about it, then you do it. If there's not anything you can do about it, then your worrying isn't going to help. It's only going to hurt you. So I think that that's the do what you can, let go of the outcome. You do your best, and then you release the outcome. And there's so much that we don't have control over in our lives, even though we do have a propensity to believe that we have more control than we do. I think that mostly there's very little. Mostly what I have control over is how I feel and how I act. I don't have control over how other people respond to what I say or do, or how they move through the world. I only have responsibility and control over myself. So that's the outcome. The outcome is I'll put this book out in the world. I don't know. I don't know who the readers are going to be. I don't know how it's going to find readers. I don't know what they're going to think when they read it. I don't know that. But I've done my best. I've done my best here, and this is now it's out there. And so that's what I feel is just it's just a good motto to live life by, I think. Do your
Yeah.
best, but release the outcome.
Yeah, and it's magnificent, the outcome. So we have a few minutes left. We have about 7 minutes left, and I'd love to talk about writing. We've talked so much about um, science and events and the Arctic, but what is most fun for you about writing? What satisfies you? What is torture? Let's talk about torture.
Torture first, okay.
Because
um,
we're in a room full of writers, I think that they'll identify.
uh, Torture is writing about hard things.
Yeah.
I would rather not write about hard things. I tried that for a while. I tried to not. But if I'm gonna, I can only write about what I love, and what I love being so much the natural world, and it's impossible to write about it realistically without having grief be part of it now. But that's hard. It's always hard for me. When I wrote Among Wolves, it's co-authored by Gordon Haber after his death. So I had all his notes, and I had this big yellow legal pad where he had handwritten this one scene of some wolves that were caught in a trap.
Oh my.
And I had never heard this story from him before. I didn't know it. And I'm sitting there reading it, and I'm just crying and crying. It was hard to finish reading it, but I thought, not only do I have to finish reading it, but it has to be part of the book. But I cried every time when I typed it into my computer the first time, when I edited it, when I looked at the proofs, every time. Um, that's really hard. I'd rather not have to do that. It's also hard to find time always, and to write, because I'd rather be outside.
Yeah.
But yeah, writing about hard things.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember in my novel how hard it was when I suddenly realized that my favorite character, the philosopher of all people, he couldn't survive the book. And that was just horrible. But talk about what's fun, what's satisfying, what lifts you.
What's fun for me is trying different forms.
Yeah.
Because I write about hard things, I play, my play is to try different forms. And poetry is really fun that way because, you can go so many places with it. But writing this novel was really fun to learn about how to write fiction and to play around. I mean, I did a lot of backstory writing, like I wrote their dreams, I wrote their childhoods, I wrote, all kinds of things that didn't make it into the book. But that's really fun for me. It's just that um, that playing in that imaginative space.
Yeah, and what is evident to a reader of what you're doing is that one of the things that I think it brings me joy to read you, and I think it's rooted in your own joy, is when you're writing about places you've been and experiences that you've had. Um, that night in the tent, uh, that night on the mountaintop. That's where it seems to me that your spirit just starts to soar.
Mm.
That's what I think. So your protagonists are both women. You're a woman. I'm looking at the list of people here who are coming to listen to you. They are not exclusively, but to a large extent, women. Um, First of all, why are women, well, my experience is that the women are very concerned about climate change, and are showing up in magnificent ways, um, and are reading about it. Talk to me about the significance of your being a woman as a writer.
Yeah. Um, well, as a writer, I start from what I know. So I haven't really tried to write as a man or any other way. But um, I know that writing as a woman, we still face a lot of judgments and roadblocks in a way to who our readers are going to be. I mean, this book, when it got put on Amazon, was put under women's friendship.
You're kidding.
so, so, it gets categorized a certain way. So, how many men are going to pick it up? And I want to thank Carlo for being here, my very good friend from Italy. And I just so I feel that but I think that like you said, women rising up, attending rallies. It's the majority. The ones I've been to are women. The talks, the readings, mostly women. Partly it's because I think women are more engaged in community in general. But I think there's this sort of rise of the feminine, and by feminine I don't mean female. I mean the feminine energy. Like the feminine energy is one of creativity and fearlessness and boundlessness, and I think that might be what we're feeling now, this sort of breaking free of these containers that don't work anymore and that have been holding us back.
Beautiful. No, we have one more minute before we're going to start the question and answer. Mary Beth, it's all yours.
Okay, you want me to read a little bit or?
Oh, why don't you do that?
Okay, all right. I think I was going to read a little section about Elise. Let's see, about the complications of being a woman and
Please.
trying to follow your path. Elise is in her studio. She's painting entirely with palette knives, filling the canvas with sharp edges and jagged lines. Her forearms ache from scraping up mounds of paint and slicing it onto the canvas, but the ache feels right. She is conflicted. Dan doesn't want her to go to Cape Ben Karam, but she ardently does. He had apologized for his harsh response, but then, in that even tone he always used on the boys, he asked even more questions she couldn't answer. Now she wonders, should she call Jim and ask these questions? Or would asking him about money and liability make him reconsider her invitation? So easy when her kids were young to know what she wanted because it was wrapped up in what was best for them. They were her first priority, a fact of which she always felt certain and defended to anyone, including her husband. She'd known the empty nest period could be challenging, but she'd expected to fill that with a return to her painting. What she hadn't expected was that by giving all those years to parenting, she'd lost any certainty about what she, all by herself, wanted. She only knows that she's felt something like sap rising ever since reading that article on polar bears. There's something going on, and she doesn't want to miss it. It's not what she'd expected her path to look like after her boys fledged, and it's certainly not what Dan expected. She feels a twinge of guilt, but the sap rise is strong. Stop there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And people will be richly rewarded when they pick up this book and read what you have written. And I hope that they will all also buy copies for their friends. To the extent that it is a story of women's friendship, give it to your friends. To the extent that it's a story about courage, give it to everybody who needs it. So let's take your questions. How are we going to do that? I think that we had Donnell. We're going to read the questions. Please enter your questions in the chat, and Donnell will pick them up and feed them to Mary Beth. Is that the plan?
Yep, that sounds good. Can you hear me, Kathleen?
Yes.
Okay, so Nancy Lord has the first question. She's curious, Mary Beth, about why you sent Elise to the Russian coast, where I don't think you've been yourself. Why that choice, and how did you research the place?
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. Good question. Yeah, I have been only to the Alaska Arctic coast, not Russia, and I did it for a couple reasons. One is because there's a lot of truth to that part of the story, and that there were a couple of Siberian marine mammal hunters and a biologist that came to Alaska, that came to Anchorage to speak, actually, brought here by the World Wildlife Fund. And they were doing exactly what's described in the book in terms of trying to keep polar bears away from the massive walrus haulouts. And that is a thing that the walrus are doing both all along the Arctic coast, including in Alaska. But the other thing is that I wanted to take this book in different places of the world. I just didn't want to stay in the United States. So that gets Elise to a different part of the world, gets her even further outside of her own comfort zone. And in terms of research, I haven't been there, but my husband's been there several times, and his friends. And so I've been hearing a lot of stories from them over the years. And then I've talked with other people that have been there. And yeah, that's how I did it.
Thank you. We have another question from Lynn Mitten. Did you have a Striley in your life who made you question your opinions, perhaps made you grow through discomfort?
Can you say that one again, Donnell?
Sure. Did you have a Striley in your life who made you question your opinions and perhaps made you grow through discomfort?
Lynn, this is my yoga teacher. Strile, I did have a professor in college that shook things up for me. Yeah, I mean, I was getting a degree in international studies so that I could be an interpreter and travel the world. And then I took his environmental policy course, and it changed everything for me. And he helped a whole group of us students get environmental studies degrees at a time when that didn't exist. And he also didn't get tenure. So there you have it. Sometimes when you step outside your comfort zone, you don't get richly rewarded. But anyhow, yeah, that was partly who Striley was modeled after. There was also a physics professor at UNC at the time that Striley is also modeled after. I did a project on renewable energy for North Carolina with this physics professor and some of his graduate students. So, yeah.
Is there another question out there, Donnell?
I don't see another one. I do have a question though, Mary Beth. With both your lead characters, they're in relationships and have, familial crises or tensions happening. And I'm curious if you felt that you wanted to represent what it was like to make a change or to have a transformation with support versus kind of lacking the support, if that was an intentional choice.
Um, it wasn't an intentional choice, but it certainly is there in both of them, isn't it? I think I they really just took on a life of their own, and so that they both have relationship issues in the book. I didn't really plan it, but yes, Astrid has the support and Elise doesn't. And what does that look like? What does that look like in terms of making those leaps that are so scary?
Heather Johnson asked, what is the name of the Buddhist teacher you referred to earlier?
Yes, her name is Pema Chodron, so it's Pema, and the last name is Chodron, Chodron. And she's excellent. She's really interesting because she was married, she had children, she had you know a American life, and then things fell apart for her, and she became a Tibetan Buddhist nun. So she speaks from I think she speaks in a way that a lot of people, a lot of Americans can hear better because she had that life before becoming a nun.
I don't see any more questions right now.
There are places in the book, both Elise and Astrid, I think both of them, say something like, I simply cannot believe, I will not allow myself to believe that human beings will let this gorgeous world just fade away. They say it in various different ways, but they both just can't make themselves believe that we're not going to pull this out at the last minute. Where do you stand on that one, Mary Beth?
I also can't believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, um, I, a lot of my hope comes from being out in the world beyond humans and seeing the resilience of the natural world, the world without us. And I get a lot of not just solace, but hope from there because there are things we're learning every day through science about this planet we live on. And there's so much we don't know. So I just get a lot of hope from that. But like both my main characters, I can't believe we haven't woken up yet. I mean, you know, I was, I went to Earth Day and I, marched on Washington in the No Nukes rallies. I've been doing this for a long time, and I thought, when I was younger, I thought I'm going to get to see the change. We're going to make this happen. And now here I am in my 60s, and I'm thinking it might happen, but I'm probably not going to live to see it. And it's a really weird thing that I've had to come to grips with the last few years is to make that realization and be okay with that somehow, to keep going anyhow. It's like the proverb, plant a tree whose shade you will never sit under. Um, but yeah, I continue to be astonished that humans haven't woken up yet. I don't understand it.
We have one question that, if I may, that asks about the origin of the name of your novel, The Bloom Again.
Yeah, and this is where it is a women's friendship story, but that comes from, there's a scene in there with Astrid where her mother says that, but um, there's the other thread in this story is that women, especially women in a certain time of life when their children are fledged, their careers are set, they've got whatever house they're going to have or whatever living situation they're going to have, and they can experience what's been called a second spring, or as Margaret Mead called postmenopausal zest, which I love that term, zest. When when women can just leap and do something entirely different. And I've seen that with friends, one got a psychology degree, another one went and, started studying museum installations. I mean, it's just entirely different than their other work and an entirely different way of being in the world. And so that's the bloom again part two. The bloom again is also just that we, as with flowering plants, we we have cycles in our lives, and we can we can bloom again into some new way of imagining how we can be of use in the world or how we can move forward.
Yes, towards the time we can imagine when the earth blooms again, too.
Yes.
We have come to the end of our hour. Mary Beth, do you want to wrap us up?
Sure. I guess I just want to say thanks to everyone for being here, and I want to love to hear what y'all think of the novel when you've read it. And I'm just really glad that we're all here on this beautiful planet together.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming, and how lovely to see all the clapping hands and the exploding hearts moving up the screen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining.